The last time I lived in LA, I had an apartment on a tiny sliver of yet to be gentrified East Hollywood, West Silver Lake, South Los Feliz, North Koreatown. It was a primarily Salvadorian neighborhood in the shadow of Los Angeles City College, and there were more mercados than there were maca shops. On the weekends, you'd wake up to the sound of women selling handmade pupusas door to door. Now, my neighborhood was run mostly by a tightly knit group of street entrepreneurs who were closely affiliated with the international crime organization MS-13. My street in particular was run by a young man who called himself Lost, who at 21 had spent more time incarcerated than I would ever spend in academia, and I got a liberal arts degree from Berkeley. Lost's parents were actually the supers of my apartment building, which meant they lived in the apartment right on top of mine rent-free in exchange for the labor of managing the place, which meant that I got a rare opportunity to connect with Lost in a way that most guys like me probably didn't. Now, every morning I'd pass by Lost on my way out to do my 5-mile run, and he'd jokingly offer me a pull of the joint that he was smoking to come down from whatever he was doing the night before. While Lost did most of his business at night, I'd say his biggest contribution to the community was actually on street cleaning day, where he would manage the delicate love song of making sure that everyone had a place to park. He'd stand in the middle of the street like a conductor, just waving and whistling and snapping while a symphony of exhaust and screeching wheels kind of crescendoed around him until every car just kind of fit into place. And this is actually how I first endeared Lost to me. See, I had a coveted currency in the neighborhood. I had a parking spot. At the time, I had a sort of adversarial relationship with the LAPD Traffic Enforcement Bureau. You see, I'd had a fix-it ticket for a missing taillight that I had gotten fixed, but just never legally rectified, and so that ticket unfortunately turned into a warrant, and that warrant meant that my truck got impounded a few times. Rather than stew in this injustice, I chose to make lemonade out of this opportunity and let Lost use my parking space while I got everything sorted out. Now, this opened the door to some wild experiences with my new colleague. Like the night that I came home from a closing shift at the restaurant that I worked at to find him sitting on the stoop with a brown paper lunch bag full of loose weed. And when I walked up and gave him my sort of ceremonial fist bump, and he gave me his ceremonial fist bump, and then he kind of gave me a nod like, hey, open your hand. And so I turned my hand over. He opened his hand and he just dropped a pile of drugs into my midst. And when I asked him about it, he just said, "Don't worry about it, homie. I got you." Or like when I had my skateboard stolen, which after having my truck impounded was my primary source of transportation, I let Lost know, and within 15 minutes he was knocking on my door with my skateboard in his hand. And when I asked him about it, he said, "Don't worry about it, homie. I got you." Or like the time that his friend with the tattoo machine got out of prison and set up shop in our parking garage. When I asked him about it, he said, "Don't worry about it, homie. I got you." Up until now, I've kind of painted Lost as this sitcom caricature of a Los Angeles gang member. He's sort of endearing, he's charming, but you're not really scared of him, you know? You kind of like him. And I did this on purpose, right? People aren't just one thing. It's an attempt to sort of build a contrast between what I just told you and then what I'm about to tell you. Which is that sometimes things got dark. People were regularly jumped in our parking garage. And you could hear bodies ricocheting across cinder block, echoing through our entire complex. Lost was always covered in bruises, stitches, bandages. He had a rotating cast of less than charming deviants that kind of orbited around him. They were sad souls at best and just chaotic people at worst. And then one night, I woke up to the sound of what I thought was construction. But it was really loud, and it was really close. Then there was some yelling, some screeching tires, and then there were gunshots, a few of them. It was really hard to go back to sleep that night. In the morning when I woke up, I noticed there were fresh bullet holes in the 70s fake rock wall that was directly underneath my living room window. And that was pretty fucking real. A few days later, I got a knock on my front door. A rare occurrence, even rarer that it was a man with a badge and a gun. And I had assumed that I was just getting my truck impounded for a third time, but no, he wanted to know how I felt. And he wanted to know if I had seen anything different in the neighborhood. He wanted to know if there was anything that I wanted to report. I said no. And then he got his car and he drove away. He didn't knock on anybody else's doors. He didn't check to see how anybody else was feeling. Just the only white guys living in the neighborhood. And that felt gross. And that made me think that if the neighborhood hasn't been gentrified yet, like maybe you're the one gentrifying it, you know? I don't know if I did the right thing. That night when I went to go to my restaurant shift and I passed by Lost, he asked me, hey, what was that about? And then I said, trying my best to pretend like I had been practicing saying it all day. Don't worry about it, homie. I got you.